Good morning and welcome to the Women Wednesdays Entrepreneur Series hosted by the Kansas City Women's Business Center. I'm Catherine Kelly, Marketing Strategist for WBC, filling in today for Brandy Stitt. The Women's Business Center has been hosting weekly webinars on a variety of topics to help small businesses negatively impacted by the COVID pandemic. Today's topic will focus on cybersecurity for small business. At the end of this session, we will share a link to our Eventbrite page where you can see our upcoming sessions. Additionally, we are recording all of our webinars, including today's. The recorded webinars will be available for you to view on our WBC YouTube channel, which you can also access from our website at kansaswbc.com. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Angela Hurt, CEO and founder of Veracity Consulting, who will also be introducing today's presenters. Patrick, I think we're having difficulty hearing Angela, so why don't you go ahead and start the presentation?
My name is Patrick Shore. I'm the Vice President of Innovation at Veracity Consulting. Veracity Consulting, as you see on the screen here, has been in business since 2006. It's a women-owned business. The founder is Angela Hurt. And what is really exciting about this is Angela really utilized the Women's Business Center and Network for a number of years to launch Veracity and get the business moving and started, and is a huge supporter of helping women in business not only start their business, but grow their business and grow the capabilities throughout the Kansas City and nationwide area. We have a record of success as we move through the organization and the industry, and we have a robust set of technologies and capabilities. And if you really think about it and get down to the bottom line, Veracity helps organizations bridge the gap between business and technology, and really with a focus on doing the right thing. Our tagline that has been in place for a number of years and is truly the mantra is, "We got this." So today we are going to begin. I shared a little bit about myself. We've also have John Dickerson. John is our practice lead in the cybersecurity area. He has a number of years experience in cybersecurity and management, and came out of the electric utility arena where they had to do vulnerability assessments and security penetration testing every year in order to maintain their certifications as an organization. So hopefully you all have in front of you the screenshots here, but as well, you received a printout or a PDF on some self-rating pages. You may want to go ahead and either print those off or have them handy, because as we go through the presentation, one of the goals of it is to really help you have a process where you can build and develop your capabilities in the cyber arena. So without any other further ado, we are going to get rolling. And I'm going to. So when we talk about it, really the title is Cybersecurity Readiness. How prepared are we? Our agenda for today, we're going to talk through some fast facts, small business, the new target. We're going to share a security management ecosystem with you. And then you're going to get to do a little bit of self-rating on how ready you are. We're going to share a little bit more about what we can do to focus and hopefully come out of here with an action plan that each one of you has the ability to build on a go-forward basis. So our objectives: understand why I should have a security plan. A lot of organizations do not have one, and many organizations feel I'm really not large enough to have to worry about it. Second goal is to understand the security ecosystem and really what makes up a good security program. Conduct a self-rating, explore actions to strengthen your security profile, create some action items, and then network with others that are in the same position that we are as we're exploring what security is all about. A few fast facts right up front. According to Verizon's 2019 data breach report, phishing is the #1 threat that is being used to penetrate organizations. Just the simple act of sending emails, texts, and other types of items with harmless intention on the forefront, with real action taking place on the backside. Second, we should begin to expect social engineering attempts due to everything happening in COVID-19, right? And we want to keep up on illness updates and those types of things. And hackers have been using that to really get into the organizations. You're going to see an awful lot of continued hacking going on with COVID-19. In item number 5, ransomware attacks have been increasingly rampant across the United States over the last year as well. We expect that to continue, and they're really hitting all types of businesses, large and small. The average requested ransom for a small business is around $5,800, while the average cost of downtime associated to ransomware has been around $46,800. I have a customer right now that they're about $160 million company, and they got hit with ransomware 2 different times, and they have paid both times to release the ransomware. But what you begin to think about is ransomware and phishing are just simply 2 of the techniques that hackers are using to get into us. So why should I care as a small business organization? Well, Lockheed Martin has indicated that 43% of all new attacks are aimed at the small and medium-sized businesses. And this is there for several reasons. One is, in most cases, small and medium have not invested the same amount of time and money and people and dedicated resources to manage the network and the traffic coming in. And what they're looking for is banking data, employee data, customer data, intellectual property, and really to get to your vendors. I'll give you a real good example. There's an organization out in South Kansas City. It's a $3 million business. And they weren't really concerned about losing a lot of their data. They've got 11 employees. So they were figuring that, nobody's going to really hack into them. What they didn't count on is the hacker was going after their intellectual property and their diagrams and patent information that they had stored on their home core business servers. So as a result, hackers were able to get in and access those diagrams and have the plans of their core products that could then be sold in the international market. And what we don't realize also is the hacker activities are very, very benign and quiet to begin with. They do reconnaissance. They look at weaponizing the information. They look at exploiting information. They look at installing backdoor items on the targets. And then really, they look to create havoc. And that's their number one goal. In many cases, a hacker, their satisfaction is just knowing that they've created havoc within your organization. In addition to that, the AppRiver Cyber Threat Index in Q3 rose from 60.5 to an all-time high, as you can see. If you look at the graph, what AppRiver does is they talk with chief security officers and business owners across the United States to get an idea of how well owners and leaders think they're ready to handle cybersecurity. On the left-hand side, obviously, they have complete cybersecurity confidence and readiness with 0 threats, and on the right, complete absence of cybersecurity. And as you can see, we are now in the very high arena. And this is due to several factors. One, hackers are getting much more sophisticated. The techniques they are using are hitting everybody in our mobile world, and they're not stopping. And that's the big key. As you begin to think about it, and hopefully one of the reasons why you came today is hackers are not stopping, and as business leaders, we must take action to really look at where we're at, where we're going, and how we can curtail our security impacts. Now, as you begin to think about it, cybersecurity is very complex. We hear all the time from owners, you know what, there's just too many things to look at. There's so many ways and so many nooks and crannies a hacker can get in. And if you look at the chart on the right, they're absolutely correct. You know, you've got data security, application, endpoint, network, perimeter security, policies, operations. So when you begin to think about it, you don't want to be in a position to overanalyze your security, but at the same time, you need to be able to look at it and say, what is my level of risk that I am ready to accept? Because when you have a business and you have a network and you have information available, whether it's resident on a server or in the cloud, you are a potential target and you can come under risk. What we do recommend there is look at your acceptable level of risk, identify and categorize the level of sensitivity. Because if you've got customer data, if you have financial data, you know that these are going to be the things that people go after. But not all is lost. We at Veracity have taken a look at the security environments and really identified a security management ecosystem that helps simplify the actual picture of security and allows you then to begin to categorize those elements. So if we go back up a page, you can see on the right-hand chart, there's a tremendous amount of items that you would need to want to look at. On this chart, we begin to look and say, what do I really need to think about as an owner? How do I create the roadmap for securing critical data? We're going to start with leadership, governance, communication, education and training, monitoring, awareness, assessment, and knowledge management. And what we're going to do in today's webinar is walk you through each one of those blocks so you can begin to put your ecosystem and your roadmap in place. Because one of the most effective ways to build and maintain this ecosystem is to look at your policies and procedures for how you implement and manage controls around your data and the information. Let's start with leadership. Number one, security is everyone's job. Your role as a leader is to put in place the mechanisms to establish the roles and responsibilities, as well as the incentives for long-term success. When you think of a small and medium-sized business, you don't have the number of employees and leaders in the organization to really dedicate, in a lot of cases, specific dedicated roles. What we suggest is this. Number one, set up your executive security steering committee, key leaders in the organization. Identify one individual to kind of be the steward of your processes. This then enables one individual in your organization to really become educated, involved, and engaged in looking at what you have to put in place. So if you think about it from a leadership standpoint, you want to establish your security team. You want to identify and create what we call security ambassadors, people around the organization that are, one, interested in security, and two, really take to heart that their job is to help make everything secure. Look at your standards, conduct some awareness, and we'll get into this heavy. Inventory and manage your systems, assess the threats and manage the risks. At a 100,000 foot level, this is an action plan for small and medium-sized organizations to really get security up and running within the organization. But your number one element there is to establish that leadership role and begin to document what you have in place and then identify the potential threats that you have as you move through it. Ideally, you also have the capability in the leadership area to pull your critical leaders together and talk about security and discuss methods and means and learnings on what you see in the industry and how they relate to your particular organization. The second block is governance. If you think about the cybersecurity landscape, when you establish a cyber or information strategy, you're looking to safeguard all assets. You want to be able to come away with confidential, confidentiality, and the fact that your data is secure. You want to establish integrity, that the data is trustworthy and accurate, consistent, and that it is available. Because as we all know, running a business, you need access to critical information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As we look at the governance arena, what John Dickerson and I have done over the last couple of months at Veracity is help identify what each element is as you go through this. So we're going to walk through some guiding principles around security. You're going to want to establish goals and objectives around security. You're going to begin to think about how much money you have available in the organization to actually put in place the elements of security management, and then the organizational structure. And yes, we recognize in many small businesses, the organization structure is going to be role-based and really handled in a highly matrixed manner. So let's dig a little deeper, right? If you want to establish a culture of security compliance, guiding principles is one of the best ways to get started. These are simple statements that govern and guide, if you will, how people will look at security and protecting the assets of data. So number one, security is everyone's job. A constant diligence. Security needs to be talked about in all hands meetings, in leadership meetings, in operations reviews, and other learning areas. It needs to be out there in front of people. Safe and secure, nothing left to chance. Security needs to be intentional. And that's why you're here today. You're beginning to look and say, how do I leave nothing to chance? I want to know what I could do and what I should do in order to protect the data of the organization. Measurable security controls, self-learning, repeatable, and predictable. Just like your cash flow management, just like your invoice management, your order management controls, you have metrics around your business operations. You want to have metrics around your security as well. You want to know the number of people coming into your environment. You want to know the number of potential attacks that are coming through on the organization. And you want to treat those metrics just like every other metric and build your programs around it. You want to have visual knowledge or early warning sensors. I want to know when an attack is taking place, not after an attack is taking place. I want to begin thinking about managed asset access. We live in a world of anywhere, anytime, any device access. And as we look at it, we want to begin to think about how we manage those assets and how we manage the security on each one of those assets. And if I am large enough to invest in getting security talent, I want top-rated talent, right? Security is not an area where I can get a junior administrator and expect them to have top-notch capabilities. This is one area that if security is important and is one of your top pillars of success, you will want to invest in having the appropriate security talent. Now, the beauty in this area is you don't have to hire all these individuals. In many cases, organizations are there that can provide you security as a service, managed security, and those types of items. But the key takeaway here is, as a leader, you need to establish the guiding principles and the risk tolerance levels that are acceptable to you.
Pat, if I can jump in just real quick on one thing.
Yes.
Go back to the previous slide. Looking from a managed asset access perspective too, and thinking about, the world that we're living in right now with the current pandemic, and, how do you manage these devices and data and information from a remote perspective, as more and more organizations, are challenged by that, being able to conduct the business, but also remaining secure at the same time. That moves that into the forefront of making sure that you balance the need for security as well as the need to conduct business. So just wanted to say that in today's world, as we're working from all places and all different devices, is making sure, that also becomes a top priority from a security perspective today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Communication, because we've got people that are working at home, in offices, on the road. Communication around security is absolutely critical. Communication methods will need to be established, escalation and notification, and then recognition of individuals that are doing the right things. So when you think about communication methods, you want to be in a position to be able to message your audience when things happen. You want to help keep the organization calm when an issue has happened. You want to take the appropriate measures and steps to ensure the fact that when an issue has taken place, whether it has been followed through on or in the discovery stage, that people in the know have been communicated and the rest of the organization has been notified as well. And in this area, we're going to dig deeper into the escalation and notification process, because most organizations, especially small businesses, have the ability to quickly get on the phone, text message, email out to the organization what is happening and what is going on. Where most fail is what we call the escalation and notification process. Think of it this way, and I'm going to use a real example. I won't name the company, but a company got a simple email that requested an individual to validate their mobile number back to a leader of the company. It looked legitimate. It looked like it came from that leader, and it looked like the leader had just forgotten the cell number and wanted to have it so they could text them. When that individual clicked on that and responded back with his or her cell phone, ransomware and hacking software was then available inside the organization. The individual recognized it very quickly, so he changed the password on his email system and sent an email out to a number of individuals within the organization, upon which multiple individuals then took the lead in solving the particular problem. Sound familiar? It's most small businesses, right? When I know something, I want to make sure everybody knows about it. If I think I'm impacted by it, I want to take action on it. If I'm in charge, I want to take the appropriate action. So what we recommend here heavily is establish your escalation and notification process, that you can identify who's going to take the action needed to identify the issue, to stop the action in progress, mitigate it, and then ensure the fact that proper actions are taking place. Okay. So when we talked about the organizational structure and having an individual in charge of security, they would begin to put in place this escalation and notification process. So what you want to be able to do then is if Tom had a phishing email and he recognized the email was a hack, he should, number one, gather all pertinent information about that. So first and foremost, he should get out of the email, do a screen print of it, and get out of the email, and change his email password immediately to stop it from going any further. He should contact your security point of contact immediately via phone or text and walk through what just took place. And then the security lead would identify the right and proper actions to take, and then determine whether or not it was an escalation or notification action to actually follow through on. The difference between the two is very simple. A notification action, the security advisor or security lead would send an email out to the individuals in the organization, letting them know an instance had taken place, give them an example of it, the website and or URL associated with that particular breach, and instruction on how to avoid it or mitigate it if in fact you had it taken place. The escalation process is an immediate stop action notification to individuals throughout the organization, and it may only go to a number of individuals as opposed to the whole organization. So as an example, in escalation, if I had a breach, I would want to notify the individuals that are running my financial system that a breach has taken place, to keep an eye on the system and the data and activities. I would want my order activity or customer service group to be aware that an action had taken place, so they can take appropriate steps as well. If you are working with partners or vendors, they absolutely need to know what has taken place and how to actually remedy the situation.
Also, I'll add into that. Think about it if you don't have an orderly plan in place, especially with remote workers, and they don't know who to contact. They'll either take the approach of contacting more people than they should, and then you've got multiple people working on it with good intentions, but probably stepping on each other's, feet while they're doing it and doing things that don't need to be done, and that creates a very chaotic response to it. And it could have unintended consequences too, of alarming people that don't need to be alarmed. So from that perspective, having that orderly process, and for remote workers to be able to know and funnel that to the right individual or individuals within your company to make sure that the response is orderly and appropriate is the most appropriate thing that you can do to avoid some unintended consequences on the backside of it as well.
And remember, as you think through that, some of the hackers' intent is to just create havoc, to create frustration or put tumbleweeds out in front of people to keep them from getting things done. They get satisfaction when they see evidence, when they accept money for ransomware, and when they simply know that they have hindered an organization from getting things done in a timely manner. We know this much: to err is human. Despite your best training efforts, some people don't learn, they don't pay enough attention, they forget, or they simply get tricked. The weakest link in any security program is a human being. We have independent will, we have a lot of things going on, and phishing is the #1 strategy since it compromises human emotion rather than technology. Many organizations, and there are a lot of tools out there to stop physical breaches if you want to spend the money on those software pieces. But the #1 area is your human emotion. They're disguised as harmless personal emails, and it only takes one person to compromise the organization. And you will be surprised at times at the individual or individuals that get compromised. I've seen it happen many times. I don't know about you, but I get around 30 to 40 emails a day, and sometimes many more. And I'm in a hurry at different times, and it takes just 1 second to click that link and push something back, push an email back to an individual that just didn't seem right. And at that point in time, it's too late. So when you think about it, awareness is a huge tool in your quiver to help eliminate and reduce potential breaches. Awareness is a state of being aware or having knowledge. Okay? We like to call it, it's an in-your-face set of reminders to pay attention to what is happening with our information and how we access it. I kind of relate it to COVID right now with my grandchildren. It continually wear the mask, wash your hands, don't touch your face, and those types of things. So the same type of activity should be put together when it comes to making sure your employees are aware of security. If security truly is everyone's job, I want to make sure that they're aware of it. So putting posters up around the organization, letting them know that, there are security hackers out there. Including information in all hands or newsletters, emails, and those types of things are very critical as a simple reminder to let people know what is happening. One of the great things that John Dickerson does in our organization is when a unique new type of breach has taken place, John grabs it and shares that with the organization, right? It's just another touch point that says, hey, everybody, be aware there's a new way our hackers are trying to breach us. Some organizations like to use videos, and there's a lot of different videos that are available on YouTube around cybersecurity. You don't necessarily have to create your own. And some of them use humor to really help illustrate how simple hackers get into our organization. All hands meetings. Anytime you're having a meeting with the organization or leadership meetings, an agenda item should be security. Take each and every opportunity along those lines to reinforce awareness and that the organization is constantly taking a vigilant stance to look at it. And then another way is performing some phishing simulations. We're going to talk about this in a couple of minutes, but phishing simulations can help you then identify how vulnerable your organization is when it comes to looking at emails and text and learning about them. And as you get more sophisticated, you can begin to look at what we call an awareness campaign. What am I going to do in January to make sure the organization is really on its toes? What am I going to do in February? What am I going to do in March? If I bring in people from the outside, I may bring in a speaker on security and have them share tips, tricks, and traps of what it's all about. The key takeaway here, though, is awareness. Making sure your people are aware of security, new techniques being used, and what to do in the event that they get hacked. Education and training. Right behind the awareness is training, right? We need to train people. It isn't just enough to go out and do some phish testing, but we need to train individuals on what happens. If you think about your infrastructure and all the information you have, you may have a CRM system that is in the cloud. You may have your financial system resident on a server inside the four walls of the organization. You may have a logistics program that's in the cloud. As you're moving through this, your employees need to be aware of all of the different touch points where vulnerabilities can take place. And when you think about a training capability and a training program, you can begin as simple as having invited speakers come in, sharing what's going on, how security works, things to be aware of, and those types of things. In the event that you are looking at a security training package, you want to have a program or a platform that will assist you in reducing the risk and exposure. You want training to change security behaviors. One that's up to date and current to new threats. And we've seen a lot of what I will call consultants that have spent time doing training really begin to utilize what I will call training partners to actually do this, because new threats and new capabilities are coming out all the time. It should cover all impact points in your network and increase adoption with a series of different training courses, right? Training courses need to be looking at firewall, password security, access, simple things such as screensavers when you're not around, setting your timer so your screen goes blank. So when you walk away to get a cup of coffee or something, that nobody can see what's going on. And a key part of training is progress tracking to ensure employee compliance. And then the ability to see what is happening in the training and get reporting on what is being done, who is taking training, and whether or not they understand it. As you look at your risk tolerance, you will make decisions on the types of training that you want to be able to have. And if you've got questions on this later, you can ask myself or John Dickerson. There's a lot of different training capabilities that are available, and many of them are now targeted at small and medium businesses from an economic standpoint. So we should be in a position to really get the training that we need. But I can't stress enough, awareness is your best training. Now let's talk about how you reinforce training with phish testing. Training programs should include scenarios that capture areas of growing concern. If you look at the examples on the page here, there are several things. People use Dropbox. Hi, Joe. Just invited you to view the employee handbook PDF on Dropbox. If the organization has not officially identified Dropbox as a capability, Joe in this particular case may look at this and think it's a legitimate invitation to join Veracity Dropbox and look at the employee handbook. As soon as he views that file, it's the gotcha. The hackers now breached him, and they have the capability of loading ransomware as well as other software that can attack the system or simply just monitor the system. They're getting out there with Google verification codes. Dear Google user, click this link to reset your password. Okay, simple, non-threatening, makes sense. A lot of people don't manage their passwords very well, and they need prompts. We need to have policies and procedures around official ways that we do our password management. Dear Joe, thank you for the purchase of Spotify Premium. Your subscription will automatically renew in 1 year. To learn more or to cancel, click here. Once again, a simple, common sense action that a human being is taken and actually then plugged in. So if you think about it, we're getting bombarded from a lot of different ways. What you want to begin to think about is do I need to set up my own phish test with the third party to go out there and see how vulnerable and how at risk I am in the marketplace. And there are several other organizations and groups out there that allow you to do a simple phish test at no cost. So what we want you to do is turn phishing clicks into teachable moments by tracking them. A systematic phishing campaign points out where additional training and attention should be directed. So if you walk away from this webinar with only one action, the action I would recommend is look into how to conduct a phish test within the organization. It's one of the fastest ways to get a handle on how vulnerable you are in the marketplace. You've got good people with great intentions. What this does is it then enables them to learn in a managed arena where the testing will just simply let them know you've been had, you just got hacked, and take these steps, or contact your administrator and let them know what has taken place here.
And I'll jump in and take this a step further too. From a leadership perspective, it helps you assess the specific training needs that you have of your organization. It lets you know what percentage of your employees will not just open and look at a link, but click on it. And then even further, some of the examples will ask for credentials. And so it gives you that targeted feeling for not only how many folks in your organization are vulnerable to realistic types of tests in this manner, but targeting that training toward that sector of your organization for maybe the specific individuals, as well as organizationally look at your overall security plan from that perspective.
And Veracity is right in the middle of doing a phish testing, I believe, starting sometime next week, because we want to see, just like every other business, how vulnerable are we? What simple elements put our organization at risk? And even more importantly, what type individuals are more susceptible to the types of phishing tests that are going on? Because these hackers, while they are simple-minded, they're very intricate in their approach, and they're very patient. They will tempt you with a phishing attempt using a Dropbox. They will attempt to hit you with a simple email. They will hit you with change of a password. They will then begin to get even more intricate in looking at the business, doing a little bit of homework, and looking and saying, just like the Dropbox, hey, Joe, we've got a new employee handbook out in Dropbox. Check it out, go look at it. In some cases, people need to get certified in technologies, or they need to look at certain types of information in the organization. So you may have one come across that talks about payroll, or it talks about you need to validate your social security number. Please click here to get to our safe and secure page to validate your company benefits and those types of items. So you want to begin looking at those types of things and conducting the phish test.
And think about things too that Pat mentioned a little bit ago in the earlier scenario, when you're talking about phishing tests and real world examples, that you get things now that go across multiple devices. They start with a simple, what looks like an email that's legitimate, asking for a cell phone number. They get the cell phone number, and then they send a legitimate looking text message that's then driving you to take further actions because it looks like it's from somebody that you recognize in a text message. So think about things now at how those simple things that look innocent can now go across multiple devices, your laptop and your cell phone, from that perspective too. So just, from an awareness perspective, I bring that out as part of things that you need to test for as well.
Thank you, John. Absolutely. And when we let's see what's going on here. I bring this to you because, being small business owners, we are now becoming the targets for these hackers. As an owner, I want to have a good awareness and training, and I'm going to begin to understand what training and phish testing capabilities are out there in the marketplace, right? There are several ones that you can begin to look at. This is one of the areas where your security leader should be involved. They should get to know and understand what Gartner is all about and how to assess cyber tools, training tools, and these types of items. What I have up on the page for those of you that aren't familiar with Gartner is what they call their quadrant, 4 quadrants. They look and evaluate software programs of all types in leaders, challengers, niche players, and visionaries. And each one then has the ability within Gartner to have, what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the capabilities, and how should I use them? And in many cases, a direct link into that company, so you can then look at their pricing and those types of items. But I'm going to talk here for a second, because as a small and medium business, KnowBe4 and InfoSec have some great low cost or no cost phishing capabilities. They won't be, in the no cost, they won't be full-blown capabilities, but they will begin to give you an idea of what to look for, where to go, and how to begin looking at the vulnerability of phish testing and human error within the organization. Questions for you to consider, because since you are now the targets, unfortunately, it means as leaders of the small and medium organizations, we must now start budgeting and investing more dollars in our security arena. That's why in the first page we talked about understanding your risk tolerance and where you would want to go with it. So here are a few things to think about. What is my budget? What am I willing to spend in order to keep my assets solid and secure, right? Which also then talks about my risk. How many licenses do I need? Am I gonna run a phishing test and I want to train everyone in the organization? Who will administrate it? Because now somebody is going to have to take the role to actually track it and follow it. What media formats do I want? As John was talking, I've got email, I've got mobile phone, I've got tablets, I've got smartwatches. Is tracking available? What type of reporting is included? Can I add my own training modules, and can I add my own context? And just as importantly, who can help? The beauty of the Women's Business Network is you have access to a lot of organizations in the greater Kansas City area that can help you, all the way from a general consultation to rolling up their sleeves and getting in and doing the work either with you or for you. So when you're thinking about your training, this is a good slide to come back to with capabilities and companies that can get in and help you out. What I don't want to do is scare you to the point where you're looking and saying, I have to invest millions of dollars in this area. Security industry recognizes small and medium-sized business organizations don't have that capability. And larger companies are now pushing those vendors to make their products more economical, because I'm getting into smaller organizations and digging through to the larger organizations. The $64,000 question is, how do I monitor and test everything in my network, right? Because I don't control everything in my network. I've got 25 people, 10 people, 200 people, 2,000 people that all have laptops, that all work from home, have all gone into Starbucks, have all gone into doing some things at hotel lobbies, coffee shops, Panera Bread, and those types of items, and not including the mobile phones and other activity. What you want to begin thinking about here is, what do I need to monitor and what do I need to test, right? Security information and event management, known as SIM, is really the process of identifying, monitoring, recording, and analyzing events that happen across your systems and applications. This is highly complex, and what you want to be thinking about is, what do I need to think about and look at for prevention activity, detection, containment, alerts, and other types of items. For small and medium organizations, outsourced managed SIM has been the most economical method of doing this security monitoring. Because all of the bullets on the right, there are software products that go out and run on the network and in the virtual networks to actually do and pulse monitor all of these particular things. What you want to begin thinking about is, I've got application servers, I've got firewalls, I've got network devices, and I have external devices hitting my network. I want to know what's hitting me and ensure the fact that I have the right policies, procedures, security, and password elements at the firewalls and the network devices to actually manage my environment. So let's really talk about the one thing in monitoring that you really do want to know and understand. Entry point protection is really an approach to protect your computer networks, right? They remotely bridge to the internal and external clients. And what they're doing is they are intercepting inbound and outbound traffic to ensure good intentions. Okay. So if you think about it, I've got a bad actor over here on the left, and they have a malicious website, and they have sent an email into Veracity. If I have endpoint management, okay, what's going to happen is in that pink internal traffic site, we're going to filter that and have a list of malicious websites, bad actors, and types, and stop it before it comes in. If an email has come in and my internal user has clicked it, and as it heads back out, it traps it once again and eliminates that connection from taking place. I still have a breach, but I have a contained breach. When you think about entry point protection, it protects corporate data when training is not enough. It's instant detection and automatic blocking of attacks by an address or domain. It leverages artificial intelligence for near zero-day vulnerabilities, and it's continuous, it's nonstop, it's real time, right? And many of these providers have and maintain a wide network of known attackers. The threat intelligence is gathered from the devices around the world and put into this malicious database, so you can have access to it and stop those dead in the tracks.
So a couple of things, if I can jump in here too, is what you're talking about is defense in depth from that perspective. There's not just a single thing that can protect your organization. There are tools and techniques and things that you can put in place that does help block malicious things from being able to get in, or help identify when something malicious does occur. If you can back up to the previous slide real quick, I just wanted to point out one thing from a SIM perspective as well. And this is a challenge for a lot of organizations to take a look at their overall, where do they need to monitor and what do they need to monitor? Because think about it, your network today is not just what's inside your office. Your network is your remote workers and all of the endpoint devices that they have. Your network is also consists of the information that you put in the cloud. So you want to make sure that you get the right data sources, that you capture those logs from those places, and they're consolidated so that you can look at things in a time slice manner, and that you can look at what's happening from the endpoint to when the user went out to the internet, to looking at what's happening at your application servers in that perspective. So the need to collect data from more than just one point within and one perspective within what's I consider your environment. And again, that's your endpoints, your network, as well as anything that can touch your applications or your network and the cloud, becomes an important piece of the discussion to make sure you're looking at the right things as well as that being saved, and that you're not looking at the wrong things or thinking that you've got everything that you need in terms of being able to identify a potential security threat. So I just wanted to jump in and to add that into the discussion when thinking about how do you protect your organization and how do you monitor your organization at large and your assets.
Excellent point, John. And when you think of it, right, as John is saying on this picture, the bad actor can be coming at you from many different ways. The internal user can also be on the left-hand side of this picture, or they're working at Starbucks on their phone and they tunnel into the organization. The beauty here is entry point protection can be very inexpensive to an organization and very beneficial to the organizations. There's a company here in Kansas City called Risk Analytics that we work with that has an excellent product set in this area. So if you think about the last few slides and begin to walk away from the webinar, one is conduct phish testing. 2, look at managed SIM and determine whether or not there's a menu of services that help you out, and look into entry point protection. Many small and medium organizations begin with that and are, I won't say they're protected, but they are highly confident in what they're doing. Now, if you think about managed SIM vendors and the software, we wanted to ensure the fact that you had some of the top products that are out there as well. When you think about service scores for basic security monitoring, you've got Exabeam, Securonix, Rapid7, FireEye, Alien Vault, Fortinet. There's a lot of really good components and packages that are out there. And if you look at complex security, you can see how the different companies are really beginning to dive into it. If you think of it this way, the products on the right-hand side with their pro versions of them are really built for your larger organizations. The products on the left-hand side provide you capabilities that we would look at monitoring and testing in the small and medium-sized organization.
And go back to the point too, from a standpoint of SIMs and SIM services, don't feel like you have to do it from a small to medium-sized business. And to your point, Pat, it's very appropriate to leverage managed services that can help you funnel that data and do the recognition of potential security gotchas for you, and help you from an awareness perspective and what you need to do as part of that. So having that monitoring in place is important, but it doesn't also need to be daunting in that you need to take it on yourself, that capability. But putting it in place is absolutely key to making sure you've got one of the cornerstones to a good security organization within your company.
Absolutely. Then we come to the assessment block, right? Because if I never test my environment, I will never know what vulnerabilities I have. A vulnerability assessment is much like insurance. I don't like paying for it, but if something ever happens, man, am I really glad I have it. When you think about a vulnerability assessment, it intends to find and identify vulnerabilities in your network. A penetration test is really a proof of concept or a deeper dive into the known and unknown vulnerabilities. So in many cases, you'll hear people talk about penetration testing versus vulnerability assessment or scanning, okay? On the left-hand side, as you begin to look at it, right, your penetration testing is really taking a look at the vulnerability areas, right, and attempting to exploit them and dig into them. They are phishing with active content, right, but not damaging, so we can find out how deep the vulnerability goes. A vulnerability scan looks at the web applications and looks at your wireless environments, your internal applications, and begins to identify where these can take place. So if you think about it, all an attacker needs is just one vulnerability to get a foothold in your network. That's why, at a minimum, you should scan your network at least once a year, right? Other organizations, require earlier and more frequent and those types of things. When you also think about assessment, right? you want to then also layer in, if you've got a building, what's my physical assessment, and how vulnerable am I to parking, lighting, access to records, shrubbery, surveillance, and those types of items. So when you think about assessments, you got vulnerability scanning, you got penetration testing, you've got some of your physical capabilities to begin thinking through. The vulnerability assessment, regardless of whether it is a physical or an informational, right, it is going to define, identify, and classify vulnerabilities that occur. It's going to provide the organization with knowledge of the issue. And because security vulnerabilities can enable hackers to access your systems, it's essential to identify the weakness areas and remediate them or mitigate them before they can get exploited. A good assessment will identify informational, no real problems, could evolve into something, keep an eye on it. Low, you know what, you should take an action on these items. You should look at these. They're generally based upon contributory practices, audit examples. Medium, this is a concern, right? I either have a weak procedural or technical control or a vulnerability in that area. And then high, these are areas that you should really begin to identify and correct as soon as possible. And most vulnerability assessments give you a really good solid report on every vulnerability impact point, its severity or sensitivity level, and recommended actions and options to take to mitigate.
Hey,
Knowledge management is a key. Go ahead, John.
I was going to, if you can go back to the previous slide too, something that I want folks to keep in mind is that a vulnerability assessment too is only a point in time assessment. The threat landscape is always changing. So from a perspective of, if you have a vulnerability assessment done today and you get the results, 6 months from now, those results could put things in high categories that weren't identified today, just because the threat landscape is always changing and additional security vulnerabilities are coming out. I mean, think about it this way. That's why Microsoft continues to have to patch the operating systems. That's why vendors are always releasing patches on schedules for vulnerabilities that are newly found. So you can't just do one and put it on the shelf and say, we're good, you know, here forward. You have to do them on a regular cadence, whether that be every 6 months or once a year, but continually look at your overall organizational posture, both from an employee and personnel perspective, as well as your infrastructure perspective. And that meaning your endpoints, your applications, all of the network points, and making sure that you are holistically looking at things organizationally and not just doing it at a point in time.
And I'm actually going to back up a page, because at the bottom we talk about, you know, the fact that if you look at your environment, part of your security role will be identifying the tolerance level as well as your frequencies for phish testing, vulnerability assessments, penetration testing, etc. If you do invest in a managed SIEM, that will provide you daily, weekly, and monthly metrics around known vulnerabilities and things that are happening within the environment as well. And you can make a decision then on the frequency of your assessments. The other thing that we've discovered in most small and medium organizations is knowledge is all over the organization. In many cases, knowledge sits in file cabinets. It sits in laptops and desktops. It sits in individual file drawers within an employee's arena. And what we recommend in this area is you create a knowledge management or a repository that captures, organizes, and categorizes your security information. It should house your policies, your procedures, your processes, your inventory of your application systems and other assets, and how you are going to look at managing the evidence that you are secure, right? So if you think about this, this would be a book, an electronic book that has my policies for password management and reset, data access, utilization of company assets. I would want process flow diagrams in there that show these are the 7 systems I have. Here's how they interrelate to each other. Here's the flow of information. And here's the critical data that could be at risk. I want to inventory our assets and our devices. I want to know that, I've got 6 MacBooks and 9 laptops. They're operating versions. I want to know what devices people are utilizing, because when I know this, I can now begin to identify my vulnerabilities. I want to have business rules there, metrics, my performance dashboard, training certificates where needed, and just as importantly, what is my evergreen process, or how do I build my security roadmap, and how do I update it monthly and quarterly, and those types of items. And there's a lot of different ways to do your knowledge book. You can use SharePoint, you can use Google Docs, you can simply have them on a secured server using file formats and those types of items. The key here isn't necessarily where you store them or how you store them. The fact is that you do store them, you have access to them, and people are utilizing and accessing them as they move forward. Now it's time for you to kind of take a look and say, we've talked about leadership, governance, and the core components. How solid am I? Am I strong? Am I weak? And how would I rate myself in this particular area? So if you could just take a minute or two, and on a 1 to 5, 1 being low and 5 being high, how well am I looking in leadership? Do I have a security role? Do I have a person that's my point of contact? And do I have a plan on how I'm going to manage security in the organization? Governance. How have I made it everybody's job? Do I have a set of guiding principles to help me govern security? Have I put together a budget, and am I spending money in the right ways across the organization when it comes to security? Communication. If something were to happen in my organization today, how ready am I to take action? Do people know what to do? Do people know how to communicate it and notify others of what is happening? And do I need to put in place an escalation and notification capability? In educate and train, how would I go about ensuring the fact that I'm making people aware? Do I do anything today as far as newsletters or emails or posters around the organization to get in and actually have them done? Have I done any type of fish testing? And if so, what have I learned? In monitoring and testing, most small and medium are low scores in this area because they simply haven't invested in the tools to manage and monitor the network unless they're part of a managed SIM. Awareness. Do I have a program in place that utilizes multimedia events, meetings, and others to drive security to the forefront? An assessment. It's simple here. Have I done an assessment? If so, have I done anything with the results? or not? And then knowledge. Do I have are my policies and procedures organized around these areas? And Catherine, this would be a time if we have questions or thoughts from our audience, if they would like to contribute to the discussion a little bit on sharing any of their ratings or asking questions, because as we begin to think about it, our next steps are going to be, what should I do and what are the actions I should or want to be taking?
Okay, I've actually put in the chat if they have any questions to go ahead and chat those, or did you want to go ahead and talk to some of them?
Well, no, they can plug them in chat and we can address them, because what I will do, this is the learning part for us with COVID. In an interactive face-to-face, we would walk around and ask people different questions. But if you've got a question in this areas, please feel free to share them through chat, because what I will do in the meantime is I'll talk through this page. Because if I'm sitting in the audience today, I want to think about what is the one thing that if I were to do it differently would make a significant difference in my security program. So in leadership, obviously, if I don't have a point of contact or a steward for security, and it may just simply be me, the owner, what do I need to do? And in many cases, it's I need to organize around security. I need to identify a person and begin getting them educated in the role of security and in researching and investigating security elements. If I'm thinking about one thing to do in governance, this is where I want to begin to look at really two elements that I would begin to think and putting in place. One would be, what is my risk tolerance level? Just like with masks with COVID. Some people will wear a mask everywhere they go. Others will wear a mask only in confined places and spaces. So you begin to look and say, what are my guiding principles? How do I want to manage the organization when it comes to security? And then the second part of governance would be, how do I develop a budget and a spending tolerance on getting security tools? What we've seen in communication, most organizations, when they're starting to go through the process, look at it and say, can I get a copy of the escalation and notification chart? Because I want to begin looking at what roles I have in the organization and how I'm going to begin communicating. In others, they simply use a Word document and write up, if this happens, these are the steps I want you to take. So communication is really sitting there and saying, okay, what do I do if I get a breach? Who do I call? What should I do to preserve the evidence? And as a leader, how do I communicate back to the organization something has taken place?
And I'll add to the communication perspective of it, have you organizationally thought through, and where I'm seeing weaknesses in organizations today is because we're all working remotely. Does that employee know who to communicate with, and how organizationally will you support them if they have an issue? For example, if their computer's infected, what do they do in order to either clean that off and know that they've taken care of the issue, or how are you going to get them a new asset? And how is that, coupled with from a security perspective, as well as a need for business continuity and conducting business. So is there a solid plan put in place, not only if they were in the office working, but from a standpoint of working remotely, and that being clear and succinct, the chain of command and who to go to?
Yep. In education and training, we have seen owners take a look at that and focus really in two areas right up front. One is building their awareness strategy to educate and make aware the employees that security is job one, and that there are multiple ways that hackers come into the organization. The second thing that we see leaders do in that area is to get a hold of, know before InfoSec or consulting organizations to say, I at least want to conduct a level 1 fish testing exercise to see and to understand, learn, and see how simple it is for hackers to play on our emotions or take advantage of the fact that we are very busy people and don't always read through and assimilate everything that we're reading and doing. In monitoring and testing, once again, this is where it comes back down to your risk level, risk tolerance levels. The two areas that we see the most is, okay, I want to investigate managed SIM and see if it's one of the right answers for me, right? Because what you get then is you get, it's kind of like OnStar for your automobile, right? I know that I've got, my network is up. I know my network traffic and bandwidth is used heavily from 7:30 to 5:15. I know that, they're hitting these databases and these systems, and they're coming through this firewall, and I've got these types of issues and or breach attempts hitting me that have been thwarted or got through. The second thing is begin investigating the endpoint protection, and you can get back a hold of myself and John, and we can share some things in that area. So how do I look at that low cost and no cost capability to trap bad actors before they come in, as well as trap bad actions before they go out? Awareness, once again, you are the biggest cheerleader of the organization. You set the tone for making people aware. So in this area, it's what's the one thing that you could or should be doing tomorrow, next week, next month, to really highlight information security and the potential impacts of letting your guard down. In assessment, it's simply, how ready am I, right? How can I run an assessment? How can I determine how much at risk I really am? And to what degree do I need to do it? In many cases, a vulnerability assessment is sufficient. If you see and experience heavy traffic and heavy amounts of potential issues, a penetration test might be advised in that area. And then in knowledge, if I am looking at knowledge, go back up. If I'm looking at knowledge, I want to begin getting organized. I want to get an inventory of my systems and their flow. I want to take all of my policies and procedures that I have around security and get them all in one place and ensure the fact that everybody knows it. We did an exercise with a company to be named later, or remain nameless, on what are our policies? Do we have policies? Where are they at? And it was interesting because the findings, and John helped me out here, the findings here came back all over the board, didn't they?
Sure did.
We had some individuals saying, yeah, we've got a password policy, and yet there wasn't a written policy anywhere, right? Well, yeah, we know what to do when this happens, and yet there was no procedure developed for people to do. So a lot of security follow through today is internal knowledge, subject matter expert knowledge. So in knowledge, it's really getting it organized.
And a lot of things come back to is assumptions that leadership has already got it taken care of. So they assume that certain policies and procedures and how to handle things are already in place when the assumption is incorrect, based on, you know, what you actually have documented, and then how you proceed from there.
Absolutely. So we've shared a few thoughts and ideas in this area for you to take and look at. What we want you to really begin thinking about now is this. Our goal was to help educate you on the components and the ecosystem of what makes a good security roadmap. When I go to webinars, I want to come out with an action plan. I want to be intrigued and have thought-provoking elements to lay down and sit there and say, what do I do next? What does my action plan look like? So in simple terms, you have the PDF that you can go back out to and identify the one or two things that you really ought to be thinking about in that area. And as you write these down, if you want to begin to think about your actions, if you want to share those, just let Catherine know, and John and I would be glad to take a look at those as we begin to think about what we're doing next. This is your action plan, it's your roadmap. And if you think about how this program is built, we do the webinar today, and then in 30 days, we will schedule another Zoom meeting to come back together and see how you're doing in these areas. Some of you will have written down very meaningful ideas. Others will mull it over, think about it. But in the next 30 days, you're going to have an opportunity to take a look at what you wrote down and share the progress, share your learnings, or get continued advice and guidance on what you can do and move forward. Catherine, did we have any chat questions?
Nope, none of them came through. We have about 5 minutes left, so.
So getting started. Here's what I do if I'm in your shoes. I take stock. I document the steps I've already taken, and I begin to document my known and areas of concern. 2, I begin to put in place a strategy, my security team. I begin to think about my guiding principles and outline a plan to really make it part of everybody's job. I create an awareness campaign. I want everybody thinking about security day in and day out. I then move forward, conduct an internal fish test to identify the results. And then I begin to look and say, I really do need to conduct some type of a vulnerability assessment to identify, rank, and mitigate my issues.
Hey, Patrick, we do have a question that says, what tools to manage policies?
So when you think about managing policies, right, there's two sides to the policies. One is the actual, do I have a policy written? And then you look at kind of the metric side of it. If I've got a policy, have I inserted any type of a metric into it? So as an example, passwords will be reset a minimum of every quarter. Okay. I now want to create a dashboard on password expiration. And when you think about the managing your policies, the biggest part is simply getting an inventory of it. And what a lot of organizations use is they use Excel with some pivot tables. So I've got policy 1, I've got the business rule that is measuring it, I've got the next date of measurement, and then I have the result and I mark down through that. Other than that, there are different dashboard software packages out there that you can plug elements and all into it. If you want to get sophisticated and spend dollars like the utility companies, they've got some software out there, but you're talking some pretty big dollars in that area.
I can be more specific on some things from a policy perspective. If you are wondering if how you stack up with your existing policies versus what's recommended from a security perspective organizationally, SANS has a great resource that you can go and look at the standard policies from a security perspective that it recommends organizationally. So that's a great tool to take a look at to see if some of those things are applicable to your organization. The other thing is that, as Pat mentioned, there are tools in the marketplace that are pretty expensive, but it allows you to take your policies and then take the inputs from a security perspective and see how you organizationally measure up against the policies. And that's both from your policies as well as policies that might be in your vertical for what you're doing, both from a federal, state, and again, from your business perspective. And they allow you, again, to see how those things measure up together. So if you're interested, we could provide some additional information. But if you're just starting from ground zero and you want to see how you stack up from a policy and procedure perspective, SANS.org is a great resource to take a look at recommended policies that you should have in place from an organizational security perspective.
Excellent. In closing, your security ecosystem is really for your team to ensure the fact that you're up to date on the latest issues. It's everybody's job. Phishing targets everybody across the organization. You want to test it and ensure the fact that you got the right policies in place. And I just want to share with everybody, thank you for coming today. Thank you for being a part of this. If you've got further questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll be more than happy to answer those as we go through it. And I want to make you aware of the weekly webinars and every Wednesday. The link down there is kansascitywbc.eventbrite.com, and they list out every upcoming event. And I do believe the next one might be on supply chain management. And thank you for coming. Catherine, it's yours.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Patrick. Last chance for any questions. Let's just wait 1 minute. Well, we'll continue to wait the minute, but I just want to thank you guys very much, John Dickerson and Patrick Shore, for joining us today from Veracity. And if they want to contact you, did we put up a slide that has your contact information, or would I need to send that out? Oh, here's a question that came in. Great, Patrick, thanks for showing that. So go ahead and jot down Patrick's email. But in the meantime, we do have a question that came in that says, well, I'm not sure. Our policies just from an IT only? I guess that's what they're asking.
No, I mean, from a security policy perspective, it should come organizationally from typically in larger organizations, risk management owns that. But I mean, IT is a definite important contributor in that, but that's going to be a much larger thing with respect to security. So and Pat had the slide up from a leadership perspective down, right? I mean, it has to be bought into organizationally, but that it deals with both the physical security, the information security, from a legal perspective, as well as what you have to follow from a federal and state guidelines as far as that as well as your particular industry that you're in. If you're in financials, you have certain guidelines that you have to follow and things like that. So it comes from a lot of different directions that are guidance to your particular organization and your organizational structure. And we're positioned that we can actually help guide you from that perspective as well.
Yeah. When you think about the policies, Catherine, I want to have policies around my information, my data, but I also want to have policies around access. Who has access to the building? Who has access to the file areas? Who has access to where I have my servers at? How do I access the building? And is the building secure? Do I have surveillance in place around the building? Do I have lighting and cameras and other types of things? So when you think of security and policies, think of the full breadth of security elements you're dealing with. What we talked about today was predominantly your information and cybersecurity.
Okay, well, I want to thank you one more time for joining us, and you guys have a great afternoon.